The Carlos Sainz situation is turning into a joke, with Red Bull retaining Perez, Mercedes making moves elsewhere, and Sauber looking shaky. Despite being one of the best drivers on the grid so far this season, Carlos Sainz is quickly running out of options for 2025. We need to talk about why the big teams are passing up the chance to get Carlos Sainz in, and the options that he has left this season. Let's get into it. You guys know that since finding out he would lose his spot at Ferrari to Lewis Hamilton at the end of the season, I've been saying that the best move for Carlos would be to get into a Red Bull seat and replace Sergio Perez. But with Sergio Perez's new Red Bull contract, meaning that he could stay with the team until the end of the 2026 season, Red Bull have taken away the most competitive seat that was available to Carlos Sainz, which leaves the Spaniard in a situation where, despite his impressive performances in recent seasons with a top team in Ferrari, the driver market seems to be slipping away from him, and he's left assessing midfield teams at best for his future, and I think he needs to make a decision fairly swiftly. First, let's look at why the Red Bull move hasn't happened, and why Red Bull are sticking with Sergio Perez, even if most of us agree it's a gamble when it comes to the Constructors' Championship. Okay, he started the season with 4 podiums in the first 5 races, but in recent weeks we've seen a clear downturn in form. An 8th place in Imola, being kicked out of Q3 in Monaco, only to collide with Kevin Magnussen on the opening lap, and another Q3 exit in Canada before a spin in the race which caused another DNF. It's not the kind of performances that you expect from a driver who's in the best car on the grid, and it's starting to look like 2024 may go in the same direction that 2023 went in for Perez, but with the consequences being much higher as the rest of the grid catches up to Red Bull. I think the reason Perez has managed to secure a contract over someone like Carlos Sainz who's available is twofold. First, Sergio Perez brings in a lot of money to the Red Bull team through sponsorships and through making Red Bull way more popular in South America. There are multiple sponsorship deals that have only collaborated with Red Bull since Perez arrived in 2021 and would undoubtedly leave if Checo was no longer driving for the team. But second, and maybe more importantly, Carlos might just be too quick for his own good in this scenario. The Red Bull higher-ups would have kept an eye on Carlos Sainz throughout his entire career because he's one of the many Red Bull Academy drivers currently on the Formula 1 grid. And they would have seen his electric start to the season, where he was the first driver to take a win other than Max Verstappen this year in Australia. And if Carlos Sainz were to come in and start getting near the level of Verstappen, the team may be worried that Carlos would just make Max's life a little bit uncomfortable, whilst also considering that back when he was teammates with Verstappen at Toro Rosso and the two were close together on track, Red Bull also had to deal with their fathers stepping in and giving their opinions, which, let's face it, is just stress and media attention that Red Bull could do without. They're usually pretty good at grabbing the headlines without having those two arguing in the background. So risking destabilizing the team that's won the Constructors' Championship 2 years in a row and the Drivers' Championship 3 years in a row, there's just not enough of a guarantee of increased performance whilst also maintaining the fairly harmonious team that they have to lose Sergio Perez's sponsors over. The door closing at Red Bull then led to a look at Mercedes, but I think Mercedes has also stopped being an option for next year as well. When Hamilton confirmed his exit, a huge number of names were thrown into the mix. Carlos Sainz, Fernando Alonso, even the return of Sebastian Vettel. But as the year has gone on and Mercedes have continued to miss the opportunity of snapping up these incredible talents that were available, it seems more and more likely that the team is set on promoting its Italian rookie, Kimi Antonelli, straight into a Formula 1 seat next season, rather than placing him at another team for a while or trying to find someone for just a year and allowing him a second year in Formula 2. And the reason that they haven't confirmed this yet is because Antonelli is under contract with Mercedes already, so the team don't need to rush. They can give Antonelli time to complete some more Formula 2 events, continue his testing program in old Formula 1 machinery, and even post-summer break, he'll be eligible for a super license. So we could see him take the wheel of this year's Mercedes in some free practice sessions at the latter Grand Prix. Then once Mercedes have more evidence of just how talented Kimi Antonelli really is, they can judge if he's the right man for the job in 2025. And announce it when the time is right, but Carlos Sainz can't hang about until well after the summer break to commit his Formula 1 future. If Sainz is really set on trying to get that Mercedes seat alongside Russell for next season, by the time Mercedes make that decision on Antonelli, all of the other options could have been taken away. We're already seeing Williams, RB, Sauber, and Alpine confirming their incoming and outgoing drivers for next year. So Carlos can't sit around and hope that Mercedes choose him over Kimi, especially because even if they do choose him at Mercedes, they'd only only want him for a year because Kimi Antonelli would probably just come in for 2026. So with Red Bull choosing Perez, Mercedes being way too big of a risk, McLaren's seat settled with Oscar and Lando, as well as Aston Martin being set with Alonso and Stroll, all of the top 5 teams are now out of the question. So wherever Sainz ends up, it's going to be a backward step in terms of performance. But choosing Sauber right now would be the biggest possible drop in performance, because after 9 races so far this season, they're the only team yet to score a point. They have had horrendous technical issues, namely with their pit stops, and they've even moved to being the slowest on race pace behind Alpine too. Like, I understand why the links are still there. The Sauber Audi argument is clear. Audi is set to come in 2026 and completely revitalize the team. And it's not like Audi are nobodies. Everywhere they've competed in motorsport, they have succeeded. And I do think Audi will be a serious team in Formula 1 and will be competitive. But I also think it's being underplayed just how far behind this team currently is and how long it will take Audi to really be competitive. In a dream scenario, Sainz would head over to Sauber in 2025 alongside Nico Hülkenberg, get himself a long-term, incredibly well-paid contract where he can have influence and build the team around him. He has one likely disastrous year in 2025 whilst the team is still in transition. Then come 2026, when all the regulations are changing, go straight into a top manufacturer producing an Audi car that is capable of winning races and even winning championships. But that's what I said, a dream. Sainz could also open his eyes in 2026 and instead be in an absolute nightmare. There is so much uncertainty when a new regulation cycle comes around, let alone relying on Audi to come into Formula 1 for the first time as a team and as a new engine manufacturer and nail both parts of that equation. I just don't know if Audi are going to be where Carlos Sainz wants them to be anytime soon. And as much as I'm excited to see them come in, I do think they're going to be competitive eventually. Becoming a competitive Formula 1 team takes time, and that time is what Carlos Sainz might not have. Which then makes you wonder if there's a team that's a little further along in its development path and is said to have reportedly the best engines in 2026 as a Mercedes customer team. And that would be Williams. Whilst Carlos Sainz's representatives would have had discussions with all the teams with seats available for next year and beyond, with Carlos Sainz looking for a team that has a plan moving forwards, it means Williams' pursuit of Carlos Sainz is not something that's come out of nowhere as a possible option, but it is a move that's gained a lot of momentum over the last couple of race weekends, going from being a last resort move to a move that looks close to being confirmed. Of the other teams left outside of Mercedes and Sauber, you would think Haas or even Alpine would have one up on Williams. Haas currently look like they have much more pace than Williams, but we know from experience that Haas often start a season a lot better than they finish, as well as Haas not maybe having the finances to bring in a driver of Carlos Sainz's name, whereas Alpine have the money and have even worked with Carlos before when they were Renault. But the relationship didn't end overly well, and Carlos would have seen the chaos behind the scenes since he stopped racing in yellow, and probably glad that he dodged a bullet. So both Haas and Alpine are unrealistic options for Carlos Sainz in my opinion, which is why Williams now seem to have a real chance of picking up Carlos Sainz to replace Logan Sargent, with negotiations getting to the point where Williams are trying to come up with something that Sainz would really have to take time to consider, because they know they can offer Carlos Sainz a project that is built for the long term, and unlike Audi, we've been able to see the progress out on track already. You could argue that Williams have been making progress and have been on a good trajectory since the Doralton takeover in 2020. With the addition of Vowles as team boss, Pat Fry as chief technical officer, as well as other technical appointments to come which James Vowles has pointed towards, and Alex Albon committing to the team long term, the Williams project seems to have a really stable foundation to build upon. I know that we've seen Williams struggle over the winter break, but the 2024 Williams FW46 did arrive just about in time in Bahrain, thanks to some heroics by the staff pulling all-nighters and sleeping at the factory, finally getting those thousands of parts together to create a Formula 1 car. That is something that the team have said they never want to go through again. And actually, now that they have updated the systems, which did delay them so much last year, they could be in a very strong position next winter to use those new updated systems that they'd have had a season to learn and improve upon, so they can actually improve a lot more compared to their rivals next year and in 2026. Can you guarantee that they'll perform better than Audi? No, definitely not. But can you guarantee that they're a team moving in the right direction? Yes, I think so. Beyond that, comparing what I expect the contract situation to be like at Audi compared to the contract situation at Williams, I imagine that Sainz would be able to negotiate a much more flexible contract with Williams. Audi coming in as a huge name in motorsport would only want to get Sainz in if they could guarantee that he was going to be there for the long term and be the face of the brand, even if they don't deliver out on track. Whereas Williams, getting in Carlos Sainz for any amount of time is amazing for them. Carlos is a driver that they couldn't have even imagined getting in a few years ago. So if they get him in, they can maybe negotiate a contract that if in 2027 Williams haven't adapted to the regulations and the Mercedes engine isn't all it's hyped up to be, he can make another move. Although if that does happen, he is getting very close to driving for all 10 teams on the grid. I know it's not exactly what a driver of Carlos Sainz's level would expect to be picking from at this point in his career. He's proven at both McLaren and now Ferrari that he can help a team develop, and he is capable of winning races. So picking the best of a bad bunch rather than getting a seat at an already established top team must be a tough reality to find yourself in. But with 2026 being such a huge regulation change, choosing between Audi and Williams is actually a difficult choice, with both having their merits. And I'd love to know, if you were Carlos Sainz, who would you pick? Audi or Williams? Let me know in the comments down below. And as you're making your choice, if you want to learn more about the 2026 regulation changes, I went through all the biggest changes in this video here. So click that link and I'll see you over there.